Good morning, this is Shelby Law with the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Sunday, June 6th, 2021. Fire potential impacts for the next couple of days are shown here, and the main issue we're looking at is the wind moving into mostly Nevada and Utah today, tomorrow, into Tuesday, and even continuing beyond that. So very strong gusty southwest winds out ahead of a trough moving into the Pacific Northwest. That combined with critical dry fuels is definitely a critical fire weather period that we're entering this week. We are seeing slightly cooler temperatures across the north, filtering in through the central and southern Great Basin throughout the work week. So expecting temperatures to only be 5 to 10 degrees above normal over the next coming days instead of those near records that we saw over the past few days. Precipitation and lightning for the last 24 hours is shown here. We had a few thunderstorms move through central Nevada and up into northern and eastern Utah. Fire activity has definitely picked up over the last couple of days, especially with the hot and dry weather and some lightning activity across the Great Basin. A couple of larger fires here in southern Idaho, northern and southern Utah. These fires are a few hundred acres or so. Precipitation for the past 7 days on the left and 30 days on the right are shown here. Just a little bit of precip here and there over the past week, especially over northeast, eastern Nevada, northwest Utah, the cluster of thunderstorm activity up there, and then also, Nevada, eastern Nevada, and then also central and eastern Utah, especially over the higher elevations. The past 30 days, again, was showing a higher amount of precipitation over northeast Nevada and central Idaho, but much below normal elsewhere. Ercs continue to be very high across southern and central Utah, where they're a little bit lower further north over northern and central Nevada and Idaho, but definitely have been increasing during this hot and dry spell. If we take a closer look at some of the ERCs across south central Idaho, we can see those values have been on a very steep incline over the past 5 to 7 days, getting near those record highs for the time of year. Further south over the southern Utah mountains, those values have been setting records for the past month or so, and they continue to be very high for the time of year, bumping up against the 97th percentile. Sampled 1,000-hour fuel moistures are shown here for a few sites in south central Idaho and Utah. We're seeing this trend across much of the geographic area where those 1,000-hour fuel moistures are much below normal for the time of year, and in many cases setting new historical records for, in some areas, almost a 20-year period of record. Here in south central Idaho, those values are between average and the historical minimums. For central and southern Utah, the values are setting records for the time of year, are very low, the 1,000 hours coming in at 4%. In central Utah and about the same across southern Utah. So a very dire situation for our heavier fuels right now. This morning's satellite imagery is showing a weakened ridge in place across the Great Basin with westerly flow, continued dry conditions. However, temperatures are lower than they have been over the past few days, with highs around 90 degrees or so in some of our northern valleys. We do have this trough of low pressure setting up off the Pacific Northwest coast. This will continue to influence weather in the Great Basin, particularly bringing an increase in wind speeds to much of Nevada and Utah for the bulk of the work week. So for today, we do have high-risk triggers issued for western Nevada, eastern and southern Nevada, and much of central and southern Utah for gusty winds and low relative humidities out ahead of that low pressure system. A closer look at the winds show gusts up to 40 to 45 miles an hour, possible in shades of pink over much of Nevada and southwest Utah. Relative humidities are also low across much of Utah and Nevada. Even over Idaho, we do have some increased winds with low relative humidities. On Monday, much of the same is expected, with that low still continuing over the Pacific Northwest. So we do continue to have high-risk triggers issued for much of Nevada and western Utah. Again, here is those stronger winds in the pinks, gusting 40 to 45 miles an hour, and continued low relative humidity. On Tuesday, the low remains in place right off the coast, just keeping us in that very dry, gusty pattern with continued threat for strong winds. The winds died down just a bit over northeast Nevada, but across southern Nevada and much of Utah, still strong gusty winds and low relative humidities, so we have high-risk triggers issued. As this low gets a little bit closer to the Great Basin, we will see temperatures continue to come down. Highs will be in the 80s across western Nevada, or western Idaho and into northern Nevada by Tuesday. So on Tuesday, the winds are strongest over southern Nevada and western Utah, with a little bit lighter winds across the west. And again, those maximum temperatures are going to be dropping, particularly over Idaho and western Nevada. Again, with those highs in even down into the 70s for portions of western Nevada. The 3-day precipitation totals are nothing. We're not expecting any precipitation for the next 3 days in the Great Basin. On Wednesday, that low finally begins to move inland, bringing an increase in winds, or continuing to bring strong winds to the Great Basin. High risk are still issued for western or eastern Nevada and western Utah. We'll see cooler temperatures continue to move in. Highs will drop down, possibly even into the 60s for a day here over western Idaho and far northern Nevada. And possibly a little bit of precipitation right along that front across the north. So on Thursday, that first little wave moves through, and then another trough right behind it, setting up over the Pacific Northwest or off the coast there. We'll keep winds in place over far southeast Utah. And then Friday, just continued dry, breezy conditions. Possibly a better chance of some precipitation, looking like maybe coming in Thursday into Friday with that next low. But again, that's just going to be across the north. And Saturday, that low just kind of still hanging out there, keeping most of the area dry and warm with a better chance across the north. 7-day totals for precipitation shown here. Really just looking at a little bit of moisture coming into the central Idaho mountains associated with that series of low pressure troughs coming in to the Pacific Northwest. Nothing expected for Utah or Nevada. An extended forecast for June 13th through the 19th, putting the bullseye of heat over the Midwest, and so still some very warm temperatures along the eastern half of the geographic area, but maybe not so hot across the west. And then as far as precipitation goes, below normal chances for Utah and Idaho, but looking at an increase in precipitation across the desert southwest. So we'll see how much, if any of this, makes it up into the Great Basin. This concludes today's fire potential briefing. Please check back tomorrow for the latest updates.